Hello everybody and welcome to our Connecting the Dots podcast. I'm Susan McGhee, I'm your host for today's episode and Chief Exec at Flexible Childcare Services Scotland. With me today in sunny Glasgow at Podcast Studio Glasgow, I have Judith Turbyne from Children in Scotland, and we're going to chat all things children's services, child poverty, hopes and aspirations, lots of fun things. So, Jude, thank you so much for joining me today in the studio.
Absolutely, my pleasure. It's lovely to be here.
Wonderful. Would you like to start by telling our listeners a wee bit about yourself, your background, what brought you to where you are today, and then something about Children in Scotland and the fantastic work that they do?
I will indeed. I'm Judith Turbyne, and I'll talk about Children in Scotland just briefly in a second. It's been a long journey, actually, to get to Children in Scotland, but I suppose my journey has always been about trying to tackle poverty and inequality, originally overseas, and then I wended my way home, ended up in Scotland and got the wonderful opportunity of being the CEO at Children in Scotland. And I think what I really like, I've been there 5 years now, and what I really like about Children in Scotland is the way it is trying to bring together voices from the sector, embed children's views in the middle of that, and make sure that we have a strong membership that gives us that legitimacy to really kind of delve into subjects, talk about subjects, talk to others, try to just bring that collaboration to life. And I really have loved that time there over the last 5 years.
Brilliant. And it's such an influential organisation and you do some brilliant work there. What would you say were the kind of key issues affecting children and families around Scotland at the moment?
Well, I think, and you'll have heard this on your other podcast, so I had a wee sneaky listen to a couple of the old ones before I came in today. But clearly what we're sort of missing a little bit in Scotland is trying to translate what are some really good policies into practice. And so what's happening is we have far too many children still living in poverty. We have great aspirations, but services that don't quite join up. We want to do whole family support, and that's great, but we're not managing to find the right way of doing that and bringing that to bear. And what we're seeing is a set of loads of people across Scotland who having a tough time before the pandemic, then the pandemic comes along, then the cost of living crisis comes along, and what you have is just a perfect storm, and we haven't really been able to even catch up with ourselves, never mind close that implementation gap, which I'm sure we'll get back to in a minute. So just too many people who are struggling, too many people who aren't able to fulfill their potential, and I think you see it in child poverty, and you just see it in just some of the real day-to-day challenges that children and families are having to deal with.
So much. The families that we see coming through our services when they first join us and tell us about the difficulties they've had in trying to, they want to work, they can't find childcare to enable them to work. They sometimes have to pick up at 2 or 3 different places from childcare, and that can make it difficult, and upfront fees and deposits and the cost of that, along with all the other costs in your family. So your costs of your housing and your power and food and all of those things and you see just how difficult life is sometimes for families. And we're definitely somewhere along the line something's going wrong, isn't it? If that's the way people are living and the challenges that they're facing, definitely.
Yeah. And I think I'm always somebody who tries to look on the positive side, what can be done, what are the solutions, and so on. And I think if I were to be a little bit upbeat, it was like we've now got a 5-year period of a new parliament where there's continuity on some of that stuff we really want to make right, where the chat around making sure our services work for our people rather than our people work for our services is very, very strong. So I think it really is a moment where we have to call out what's not working well, find out what is working well, and try to use that to bridge that gap and make a real difference. Because yes, it's just not joined up enough. We're just not putting our resources quite in the right place, I don't think.
Absolutely. No, definitely. And there are far too many children and families still living in poverty and struggling in so many ways. And what are your thoughts then? Obviously, we're talking about childcare and flexible childcare and access to childcare. But how about how access to childcare and other interventions could link to make that better for families?
Absolutely. I think that's one of the things that gets me very excited in terms of there's real potential, because what you've seen, and we are much less, obviously you're the experts on childcare, there's lots of brilliant organisations working on childcare across Scotland, but when we were a bit involved in the access to childcare work that went on and was really looking at different models of flexible childcare, you could really see the way in which the potential of that on its own released potential of the families, of the parents, to actually study, to work, all the things that we need to do. But around that, what we need in Scotland, if we're to deliver whole family support, which we're talking about a lot, getting people at the right time, supporting them before it becomes crisis, finding different ways of ensuring that services are wrapped around them, then we need these points of contact. And I think when you think of childcare, if you have a child, if you don't have a child, then you're not going to access childcare. But if you have a child, you're very likely to access childcare. And therefore, we could be very good about getting that support at the right place at the right time. And some of that work, parenting across Scotland, facilitating open kindergarten, but it doesn't really matter what you call it. It's the principles of finding a way of bringing families, bringing parents in at a time when it's very easy for them, something that they need to do, something that's useful for them in terms of childcare, but then having the services available and willing and able to engage in those moments, so that then if a parent comes in, it might just be parenting needs. Sometimes parents are having a total panic, right? But it might be financial needs. It might be all sorts of different needs they have. They might have some health needs themselves that they haven't really recognised, or they don't know. They might be depressed and they don't really know, or they're too worried to talk about it out loud. Yeah. So there's all these different things that might be going on. And it's a great moment to sort of go, wait a minute, people have these needs, let's wrap that around a bit. And you need other hubs in a community, but childcare is a brilliant way of wrapping services around people instead of making people, seek out all these different services that exist elsewhere.
It certainly feels like it's a place that families are comfortable with and familiar with, and they're in and out regularly, so it feels such a natural place to have the other services, doesn't it, that can help families and that they can access. And it's that whole no wrong door kind of approach, isn't it, that we're making sure people have got what they need, where and when they need it, and with people and in an environment that they're comfortable to have those discussions. And it's so interesting that the role of the childcare practitioner and just the service is changing more and more to have some of that wraparound support in it, and bringing in some of the whole family support, open kindergarten, stay and play, PEEP, and all of those kind of things is making such a difference to families. So,
And I think that what you say, which is a brilliant way of putting it, is like finding a place where people feel very happy. How often is it that your kid, I've only got the one, never know why anybody goes more than one, it's very hard work, but your child becomes a sort of introducing thing, right? It makes you meet people. So if somebody's feeling a wee bit isolated, they have their child, they go to childcare, they're immediately in a community that they're vaguely familiar with, and they might find somebody to support them. So I think it's just a great way of finding people where they're at, encouraging them to open up and just creating that supporting environment. And I think if you think about the skills of childcare practitioners, one of their main skills is putting people at their ease, right? They put small people at their ease all the time, and so they can create that environment that's comfortable for adults as well.
Definitely, and we could make so much better use of some of the buildings that we have in our communities around some of that, couldn't we? Those childcare spaces and things to be able to provide some of that additional. And then the school estate that's open for such a small part of the year, and all of those things that could be expanded to use. It's good. And childcare, we're talking there about how it's part of a much bigger picture of family support, but it's also part of a much bigger picture around the things that it delivers. So it's delivering, the early education and supporting reducing the attainment gap and all of those things around the experience for children. But it's also playing a huge part in parents' employability and economic growth for communities and all of those kind of things. do you think that that's focused on enough around policy and discussions around that sort of bigger role of childcare?
What I would say is it's focused on more than it used to be, I would say, but yet not quite embraced in the way it's sometimes talked about, and then it gets put off to the side again as just a childcare thing. Yeah. And the more that we embed that into, this is something that's about our overall life, it's about our social life, it's about our economic life, it's about all those aspects of life. And if you get the childcare bit right, you get a lot of other things right. And I think there's a ways to go on that. I think across I think that's one of the things we should be working as a sector on, because many different organisations will be engaged with different parts of government, just making sure that there's that ongoing thread, that this is about this over here, but it's also about this and it's also about this. And if we get that right, look what we'll do. We'll allow our parents, our mothers, our fathers, very often our mothers, but our fathers too, to get out and to get the education that maybe they weren't able to get, particularly if they're younger parents and they had to miss that, or to get that job. And if it's flexible, then actually get that job that works for them, rather than have to get a job that they can't actually manage and doesn't actually give them any money because it's at the wrong times of day and all that kind of stuff. So I think that economic thing, we've begun to win the argument, but there's a lot more to do, I think, to keep that in the forefront of what we're talking about, because that changes the way you fund things, that changes the way you prioritise things, that changes what you do, because you can see the impact. It's very difficult sometimes to show the long-term impact of interventions that are in the social space. But actually, and I think we have to get better about that as well. But there's, so just being able to draw that picture of this is what happens here, and then the outcome is this: happier children, happier parents, but a better social environment, a better economic environment, and therefore it is what we should be in. One of the things we should definitely be investing in.
Definitely, absolutely. We're currently working on that, how we can do a piece of research that gives back that evidence about the return on investment and the benefit for the children and all of those different things that come out of it. But it is a long thing, like you say. It's not just something that you can do really quickly, because that investment now at that early stage could be the thing that lets that parent go back to work, complete a qualification, but actually progress in a career and reach a point that they're way up here in 5 or 6 years' time. And I'm thinking, but I need that information now, but I can't get that information now. Should have started this all those years ago, kind of thing. So
but it's a great point, because even if you look over the long term of these things, there'll be ups and downs and blips and whatever. So you need the long term data to show it, and some of it because you've seen it a bit more anecdotally, but actually, in order to really put our resources in the right place, we do need that picture so that we can show what we're doing, what the outcomes are, and all that kind of stuff. And I think one of the interesting pieces of work that's going on at the moment, and it hasn't been, I don't think, published yet, but Celsus, somebody within Celsus has been doing a bit of research trying to look at indicators that will show around the GIRFIC well-being indicators, what progress we've made over the last 20 years. And the last 20 years, particularly the last 10 years, have been quite tumultuous. And it's quite interesting because there are some there's some things that are, would appear unshiftable, and we have to think about doing things differently. Some things that are going positively, some things that are going up and down. But that's over 20 years. We really need that kind of data over 30, 40. And you need to keep the faith. That is the problem. The problem is sometimes what happens is, because we try to measure things, like you say, you want the answer now, right? And that's what politicians, that's what the papers want to see. That's what the public wants to see. Well, what's the impact of this? Well, I can show you the impact, but I can't really show you the real impact, because that's longer term. And so you end up measuring the wrong things, and you end up getting impatient politicians to go, well, that isn't really working. Well, it's not going to work now. It's going to work when we've actually invested 5, 10 years in that. So there's a bit of a job to do to make sure that we're keeping with the programme and not panicking and starting to do something else. And I think that we have a tendency as a as an overall society to be a wee bit impatient about our pace of change, and so we need to kind of go, no, this is working. It's a bit slow, but it's working, and we'll get there. But you have to continue to invest, and in fact, you have to invest more. Oh, but yes, we have to invest more because otherwise you won't see the outcomes. So
no, I absolutely get that, and the reason I want the information now is because other people want that information that I need to evidence to people, and you're like, oh right, okay, and actually, I know it's working. I can see the life's changing for the families that we're working with. So I absolutely know that it is working. And I'm confident that if you speak to those families in X number of years' time, we will be able to see that further improvement and the difference that it's made. And there will no doubt have been ups and downs. Everybody has ups and downs in their life, don't you? But it's really hard not to say, I need it now. I need it now. And I need it now.
But we need to be the ones who are resisting.
We have to be brave.
Yeah, obviously getting as much information as we can now, but holding people to giving people a bit of a safety net. It's okay to keep on with this because it's actually working. And I think your sort of qualitative observations and the observations over many years of working in the sector these are the valuable bits of information as you're constructing that longer term picture, because that's very reliable information that you've seen and you can talk about and you can illustrate, and case studies can illustrate and all that stuff. So we do have a rich vein, a rich tapestry of information, but that getting that more economic argument is something that is longer term, but we need to find ways of doing so.
Yeah, and there's loads of brilliant information out there, isn't there, around lots of different areas about this, around some of the childcare stuff, but also around the whole family support stuff. The reports that have come out recently around the open kindergarten stuff and things are showing massive benefits from that as well, aren't they? So it is stick with what we've got and just be faithful and keep moving forward, isn't it? So despite it being challenging sometimes, but we're good at doing hard things in Scotland. We have enshrined the UNCRC in law, which is fantastic, and obviously everybody's now working to try and embed that, and it's nice to hear it spoken about much more about, but children have rights, and certainly within our own services, that's how we're framing some of the things we're doing with the team, some of the training, and some of the maybe it's a rainy day and nobody wants to go outside because they've straightened their hair that morning. I'm saying, well, hold on a minute, how does that fit with our children's rights? Oh yeah, okay. So even down to that little level, looping back on where does it fit for our children's rights? These children have a right to a beautiful environment, to education opportunities, to have time in the fresh air, to have nice food, all of those things. And it's a really nice way to measure what you're providing in a service, I suppose. We really like it for that purpose. But you've done lots of work around the UNCRC and the children's rights. What do you think that looks like, a rights-based approach for children in Scotland? What are we...
I think for us it's quite interesting because, a lot of what we do is bringing other people together, but we also deliver just some services, additional support for learning. I think one of the fundamentals and the bit that if you get it right really helps shape the rest of what you do is getting those views of children. They have a right to participate in decisions according to their capacity. There's evolving capacities over their age as they grow up, but just getting that piece of children's views running through the organisation and the work and the policy positions and all that, which sounds absolutely beautiful, is obviously it's more difficult to do because it's quite, it's labour intensive. But of course, what it does is it makes sure your work is on a good foundation, and it means your work in the longer term is of much just better quality. So I think we've spent quite a lot of time over the last few years working out what that means for us, and hopefully trying to support the sector to do that work in a good way. There's several ways in which it's important for us. One is corporately making sure we have our own advisory group, which is informing how we recruit, what our strategic plan looks like, what our policy position looks like. And the involvement depends, it varies. It's not like directly in every, they don't work for us. They meet once every couple of months. But we do, that's a very important tool for us in terms of making sure that those views are included. And then I think We support other groups who are much more engaged in additional support for learning, and giving us and others great views on what is going on. And then suicide prevention also, we have a group around that. And I think we see ourselves evolving to make sure it's embedded within our organisation. But now when we are doing new participation work, it should be around that real complex area, because I think there's so much good practice now in terms of children's participation and engagement. It's getting better and better. There's lots of people doing it. It's really great. The complexities of working with people who have more complex needs, that's challenging. And so we're trying to do more work around that and make sure that then becomes something that we can support others with as they are developing their own practice around that. So to me, one of the changes that we've seen over this journey with getting UNCRC incorporated is that that piece that is improving. There's loads of areas where it isn't working. There's loads of areas where it's impartial. What's not impartial, where it's piecemeal, where it's not really done appropriately. There's loads of places where perhaps some participation is done, but the actual feedback to make it absolutely realistic isn't happening. But there is a quantitative and qualitative improvement in the amount of that kind of work that is going on, and people trying to make that right, and sort of trying to make sure that from the very beginning of policies, they're looking at their child rights assessment, child rights and wellbeing assessments, which again, some of them are brilliant, some of them are less good, but the more, and sometimes people miss them altogether, and I talk about government and all sorts of people missing them altogether. So it's holding people to account to take those and to make sure they're doing them, to make sure they're being not just tokenistic, but they're really doing it appropriately, so that it can actually have an impact on what they're doing and not just be an exercise because they've been told to do that exercise. And in some ways, I think with children's rights particularly, it's amazing that we got it incorporated. It's brilliant, right?
It's fantastic.
And it was also amazing that we got it incorporated with cross-party agreement. Fantastic, right? Are we where we need to be? No, we're not, right? So that's well, at one level it's not okay, but at another level it's sort of understandable. There is a lot of work to do to be able to do it appropriately. So I think one of the things that we need to do, and of course we've got Together, the great organisation that brings that rights thing to the fore. So we let them lead on most of this stuff, and they do a fantastic job about really trying to see where things are really advancing, where there's challenges, how we can really get to where child rights are at the heart of our budgeting. We're not even close to that yet, right? That's where we need to get to, so that we are flipping what we do, and therefore that takes us into the preventative space right away. You know, we always struggle to get into that preventative place as a nation, but if we could really put the child rights at the heart of our budgeting, that would take us there. So I think we've got many steps to take. There is good things going on, but actually it's up to all of us across all the sectors to be challenging our peers, but also challenging those who are funding us, challenging if we're funders, challenging those we are funding, whatever it is, making sure that we're all part of that journey, because it will make a significant difference to how we work in our policy and in our finances if we can get that bit right.
Yeah, and that whole prevention thing, it's such a focus at the moment, isn't it? How do we move to prevention safely, because we've still got to provide the service at the moment for the people that haven't had the help at prevention stage. So that sort of upstream, downstream thing. But you're absolutely right. If the policy and the budgeting was all done around that, it's literally taking it right into that space, isn't it? Right from the start. So it's really interesting.
It would be, it is. It's certainly what we need to be pushing towards, because it is, as you say, that thing about getting into the preventative space. We all, not everybody agrees, but pretty much most of us agree that
that's where we need to be.
There's the odd dissenting voice. But you're right. How do we do that without just letting people who are really suffering, we can't, as a nation, we'd never be able to do that. So how do we make that change? And one of them is, how do we resource that both of these things at the same time as we make that change? And I think there's a conversation to be had on that with all sorts of different people who have access to resources, because we're not suddenly going to have more public resource. So how do we make that shift? Because we know we need to do that. And there's some interesting work going on about how you make that switch and how you find new funds to make that switch. And I think we really need to spend more time on that, because I think that would make a massive difference if we could go, right, we've got 10 years now, we can fund this bit over here for 10 years, but hopefully in 10 years we won't need it anymore, because sometimes it's very long term. So again, you can't just say, oh, in 2 years we'll switch that off. That's not the way it goes. So there's a resourcing question about what can we do in that space to actually invest and disinvest, as they say sometimes. So,
and I think that's about that whole thing around public and private and philanthropic and grant funding, all of those things coming together, isn't it? Because at the moment there is money in the system. There is definitely money there. But it's used in so many different ways, dotted around the place, that actually probably have a much bigger impact if there was a collaborative approach to that. And how do we fund both ends of that scale till we reach that point? So definitely things around that. And what about life for children and young people with additional support needs? Is that improving? Are we getting better at providing what they need? We still find families come to us and say, can you help my child? Well, can we have a space? Because I've been told that here and here and here, there's no space for them. And I can't get my head around that. And practically, from a business point of view, I can understand a childcare provider thinking, I can understand their logic. They're thinking that it's measured on space, the number of children I can have. Is that going to impact that? I'll need extra staff. Where am I going to get the funding for that? I get that. But it's just wrong. Where if there's a possibility that a child with additional support needs can be accommodated within the service, they should be accommodated within the service. And we always start from, yes, we'll do it. And then we work through to get to that point. But I know that's not happening everywhere. So are we getting better at it? What's happening?
I think we've been a bit stuck over the last few years. I think some of the ideas that are in there, and we could do a whole session on this and get some of the experts from our team, because they're so good in all this stuff. But I think we know what needs to happen, and we're not making it happen. And again, there's a resourcing question there. If you look at how additional support was funded, we're not even back to levels of, I wouldn't be able to tell you which, but we're way below the levels we need to be at. And actually we need to go beyond that level. And so that's a challenge, because if you don't have that resourcing, I sort of get why some settings go, well, I can't do that because but you're right, we should be starting from the child has a right, so the child goes to the setting, that they need to go to, and then they're accommodated. So I think there's a whole, again, over this next 5 years, with a sort of a commitment and a reinforced commitment, it has to be said, from government, that they want to carry on with the action plan and really embed it. And we like to celebrate some parts of that, because some parts of that have had to change. The way you get information around this stuff now is much better. You've got more access to mediation. There's things that are sort of positive in that space, but the truth is that children and families are not getting the support they need. And I have to say, there's some brilliant examples of where it works well, like everything, right? Brilliant examples where you can celebrate the success. And one of the things that I like about some of the work we've done around this, we have our Success Looks Different Awards. I don't know if you've seen that.
Right, okay.
And they're run by our inclusion ambassadors. So they're people. Children, young people from secondary school age settings with additional support needs, and they come together and they sort of talk about policy and blah blah blah. But they came up with this idea: why don't we try to do not just moan all the time? I'm sure they didn't say that, but why don't we just highlight all the bad stuff? Let's find some good examples, right? Because what we need to do is we need to now go, right, enough already, we've been talking about this for ages. How do we make the difference? And so what we've done over the last, I want to say 3 or 4 years, but my time has gone really weird since COVID.
It has, hasn't it? Yeah, no idea.
Is to find I think it's usually a primary, a secondary, and a special setting, where they've done something brilliant in terms of additional support for learning.
Okay, yeah.
And there's loads of them, right? So that's the good side. So what is happening though is that is not in no way, shape or form happening for all children, and that's what we need to happen. So it needs a concerted effort. There's another challenge on top of that, which is, of course, the numbers of children being diagnosed has massively risen,
hasn't it? Yeah.
So how do we deal with that, and what does that really mean? And at what point does that become the majority and not the minority?
Well, there is that though,
exactly.
isn't there? Yeah.
And therefore, what does that mean in terms of the way we structure our school setting? So there's some big questions to ask about how we do that, because I think a lot of good practice around additional support for learning is practice that's good for everybody, right?
Yeah.
And so how do we just embed that in our schools? And then there's children that need a lot more extra support, quite rightly. And that's a slightly different case. But so how do we embed that in our schools? So when you say, are we getting it right? I would say, no, we're not getting it right. We're getting some bits right. Yeah. We've got some of the right messaging. We've got some of the right commitments. And therefore, it's really a job for us to look at how we can come together to really get an action plan that will work. And again, I'm talking about sometimes things are very long term, but I think if you have a new 5-year parliament where you've got a commitment and a recommitment to this area of work, right, we want to see real progress in those 5 years around what people are feeling and experiencing on the ground. And I suppose one of the things that we really want to contribute to that, because mostly what we do is information and advice, right? So that's at this end of the scale. It doesn't really help. Well, it does help, but it doesn't solve the problem. It just tells people about their rights. And that's brilliant. And I think what's really good is that government have grasped that, and they've increased the support around that, particularly around complex needs and stuff. There's much more ability for us to go out and do outreach stuff and work with local authorities and do some training and so on. And so that will hopefully begin to change just the way that's approached. We're not that big, so I'm not going to say it's going to be instant, but at least there's a bit of increased finance around that to make that much more embedded across the country. And that will hopefully help, because I think there's I wish I could remember the name of the school, but there was a secondary school that was at a conference that I was asked to chair. And again, the conference brought together good examples of working with additional support for learning. And this was the head came along with loads of his staff. And it was amazing, because what they had done was a whole cultural shift in their school, a massive cultural shift, so that they changed the way they did practically everything, and they had buy-in. And he was very clear, when you do something like this, and we all know that if you get involved in a process of change, there's going to be 20% of people who don't come with you, right?
Of course there is,
So, but we've made this work, because I've got the people who are really keen, and I've got the ones who are pretty keen. And what we've done is we've changed the way we do things, and it has had a significant impact. And the fantastic thing was, he had people from each different kind of speciality within the school, the support assistants, the teachers, the head of, the nurture, I think the head of nurture, all of it. And he had changed that school around because he'd been given the power to do that. And he had done that without a massive increase in resources.
Budget,
So there's something to be said for recognising that, some of it's about resourcing, but some of it's about thinking about things totally differently. Yeah. Because if we want to create school settings that are inclusive for our children, then they should be different, and they should work for the people who are perhaps needing more challenge, and the children who really it should work for everybody. Yeah. And so that, I thought that was a brilliant example, and the fact that they were leading by absolute example, by not coming to the conference just talking about what they had done. They were coming to the conference as a team to say, this is what we have done together. And all I've done is I've released the potential my staff
To
do it
enable
differently. So yeah, we're not getting it right. There's too many children that are missed. There's too many families who then get very frustrated. And actually, we can't wait all the time for diagnoses and all that kind of stuff. How are we getting the culture right now so that the child might get diagnosed, but actually we just want to deal with them where they're at and support them where they're at.
Yeah.
And if we could get more of that right, then we would actually move things along.
Definitely, yeah, because you can see those needs pre-diagnosis. You can see what the child needs. You don't need somebody to put a label to tell you that. So you can still take the actions required to meet those needs. And the school thing you were talking about was really interesting too, about that do we need to restructure the whole school thing? And I was listening to something recently, it must have been on the radio, driving no doubt as usual, and they were talking about the numbers of children who have various diagnoses, lots of neurodivergencies, that meant that school wasn't working for them. And I was actually, maybe we're at the point that the way we deliver school isn't working, and maybe it's that we need to look at as a bigger picture and say that actually the world is changing and young people are changing, and we need to do something differently now. That sometimes it's okay to say that that's worked for all these years, but actually increasingly it's not working, and it's time for us to change things and do something else. So
and I think these conversations about education reform are just the right time to be having it. You know, what do we do? How can we change this, and how can we change this, and being a bit realistic, because we could all sit around and go, well, if I had another 200 billion pounds, I could do this, that, and the next thing. Well, we don't have an extra 200 billion pounds, but there's loads we can do. Do you know what I mean? And I think that, you know, tackling it at its roots, i.e. if school's not working for the majority of kids, or certainly for it works to a degree for many kids, but it doesn't work in the way we'd like it to work.
No, not at all.
So how do we shift that, and how do we make that different? And making sure that everybody's part of that conversation, because it shouldn't be parents against teachers against, you know what I mean? It's about that whole school community coming together, putting children's views at the centre, children's rights, and going, what do we do here to make this work in a way that works for everybody in this school setting, and particularly make sure that our children and young people are getting what they need in order to thrive when they get older.
Because ultimately everybody that's involved in that wants a good outcome for the children, the school, the community, don't they? So it is about that. How can we all be part of this together and take it forward and make something better? And everybody gains from that. We've found where we've made those spaces available, and we've had all sorts of equipment, standing frames, and we've got the team are been trained in pig feeding, and we've got hoists and all of the different things that you need to accommodate children's needs. But actually, every single person in that service benefits from that. All of the team working with the child and family benefit, because it's broadening their experience. But the children, for them, it just becomes normal, and they care so naturally, and they're so naturally inclusive that they find a way to accommodate their pal in their games and things. And we could all learn so much just from observing the way that they automatically include children and young people. It's interesting to see, definitely. So exciting times. Although lots of challenges, but
but again, it's finding people, you know, like your service, many other services who are on that journey already and making those changes and embracing it, and are not scared off by it. Because I think sometimes maybe these settings that go, oh, I can't deal with this, and kind of get panicked. Well, they just need support to get to the state that they can do it appropriately. And some of that's around, once we ran this, we got the chance of running this very small fund, the Inclusion Fund. I don't know if you ever had any. And it was a fund that just supported individual settings with individuals so that they could get special equipment or whatever, but also had, and we don't usually have funds, so it's all very weird that I'm talking about this, but it just so happened that I don't really know why it landed on our desk. But anyway, and then sometimes it was about training, and what you found from that was that very little expenditure made a significant difference, but the setting didn't have the money. Do you know what I mean? So very little kind of could release a big thing. The challenge more often was, you know, what we want to do is we want to train all our staff in this thing, but there was never any time for the staff to do the training to do that. So how do you support the workforce to be able to be ready for that? And I think that's one of the big questions around some of this stuff. How do we support the workforce, particularly in those kind of jobs where
definitely
it's full on all the time and there's never enough people and there's lots of children. It's like you're running around in it.
That's right. And the only time you can often do training is twilight or weekends, and people are so busy and working so hard during the week that you think it just feels wrong to be saying you need to stay back. And it's not, you're tired at the end of the day, so you're not taking all of that in the same, and people's weekends are precious. So it is really, really difficult. And that whole workforce thing is really interesting. I've spoken to a few people about it actually, we're talking about expanding childcare, we're talking about the role of childcare changing, so all the wraparound stuff that's coming in around it, and that the need for the real workforce strategy that sits behind that supports the work that we do with children and young people and their families. So that needs some significant planning as part of whatever policies come out of all the commitments that we heard pre-election. The workforce part of it needs to be a really big part of that, doesn't it?
Oh, so, I think it's one of the most significant things because, and not least because of the disparity sometimes between perhaps, local authority and your small little setting over here, and, the challenge with paying people what they deserve to be paid for what is a very important job, paying them appropriately, them seeing a sort of parity of esteem across the sector, paying them enough so that there's, maybe they can have a bit of time to go and do some training, all those things. So there does need to be workforce planning. There needs to be investment in that. So I very much welcome the commitments around childcare, but to make the commitments work, the workforce piece has to be properly grappled with, which is no easy feat, but very, very important.
Definitely. Yeah, well, we can't do it without the workforce, can we? We absolutely have to have the right people there, and they need to be valued and fairly remunerated. That word always gets me.
Isn't it? The M and
paid
the N
well.
are definitely the wrong way
they
around.
are, aren't they? Definitely. No, they do. They need to be fairly paid and valued, and they need to have career progression routes and all of those things to, if nothing else, to attract people into the sector, because there will be a need for significant growth in the workforce if we're going to expand all of that, and their skill set and the qualifications they need needs to broaden along with the broadening role, really, and the expectations that are placed on that. Either that, or we need to look at the roles within the sector and whether there are the childcare practitioner roles and the family support roles as separate things, but within the same service, working alongside each other. So it's.
But there's definitely a lot of thinking to be done, and I think that career progression thing, because you want people. It's not just about. It is about progressing your career, but it's also just about progressing in your practice. Do you know what I mean? And sometimes if you can't see any way of going anywhere else or anything else happening, you might just get a wee bit stagnant. We've all been there probably in jobs we've had in the past.
Definitely,
where you stop being challenged by your job, and you may be a brilliant practitioner. You might be stop being a brilliant practitioner because you're not growing, you're not keeping up, you're not getting the support to do the development that you need. So I think we really do need to look at that. It's such a you can't say it often enough. Like your child is your most precious thing, and you're handing it over to these people who you absolutely trust to look after your child. It's one of the most important jobs in the world, and yet we don't really resource it. Well, we don't resource it the way it really needs to be resourced. So
I was observing one of our practitioners in Dundee, actually. I was there earlier this week, who had started with us a few years back, really quite lacking confidence, and would avoid the handover bit of the day, giving parents information on the day, and maybe didn't always have the vocabulary that she felt she needed for some of that, or she wouldn't have explained it in that way, but that would be sort of the situation she was in. And I was watching her give feedback at the end of the day, on Monday, I think, for a wee one that had a wee bit of a challenging day with her emotions and things. And I always think, as a parent, if you've been away from your child all day and you come to pick them up and you get negative stuff, it's a horrible experience. But the way she handled it, and the information she gave to parent with the wee one hovering around at their feet so could hear all of this was just so beautifully handled. She explained, so mum knew that the wee one had had a challenging day, but in such a nice way and with such confidence and compassion. And I thought, that's training and experience that you can see the difference in somebody, that they're able to do that. And that's the sort of journey everybody needs in the sector, isn't it? To be that continually learning and growing and challenging their own practice so that it's constantly evolving and getting better. So the thing I was at last week with Acumen, they were talking to us about remaining in our productive zone of disequilibrium.
That's interesting.
Because that's where the learning takes place and where good things happen and the change of. So you mean out of our comfort zone, really, but not the bit where we're all going crazy. So the bit where we're all going crazy is our limit of tolerance, and that bit in the middle is where the magic happens. So I'm saying, right, okay, we'll keep some of the team out of their in their productive zone of disequilibrium. That right? Okay, so it's interesting, but it's that whole thing about, you don't learn if you're just doing the same boring stuff all the time, do you? Yeah. So,
and then you get your brain starts to switch off.
Yeah, definitely. It's good. Interesting. So, And if you had a magic wand, or if you got to sit in Mr. Swinney's seat for a day, what things would you like to do? What do you think would make a real difference?
Overall, for our children and young people?
Yeah, to make life better for children and young people.
Well, first of all, I would really, a magic wand. If I had a magic wand, I could do anything. I could just magic up money. But magicking up money is not really the solution, because you need to change the way you do things.
You do.
If we magicked up money and just did everything we're doing a bit more, I don't think that's really the answer. So I would go, right, we're going to drop some of this stuff that you're going to do this over the next 5 years. We're not going to do that. And we're not going to do that. And I'm not going to tell you now what we're not going to do, because I'll get I'll get 100.
Yeah, quite right. Don't you say that? Yeah.
Don't you say that? And say, listen, if we really want to move into the preventative zone, if we want to make Scotland the place we want it to be, not just for our children and young people, but for our children and young people, their families, and there for society, then we have to stop doing that. We have to invest all of that in that preventative space. We have to really, we have to construct that whole family support model, a vision for the whole of Scotland. We have to resource it, and we have to find some new money as well at the same time, so that we can, carry on doing some of this crisis support. I'm not saying I'm not saying stop doing that. I'm saying stop doing some of the things that we keep inventing, that we're going to do more of this and more of that and more of the next thing and more of the next thing. Some of these things are nice to haves, right? And I have no problem with that. But we don't have to do everything now. It's whenever I hear, we just want a new bit of legislation around this, I'm like, oh, please, let's just try and implement the stuff we have. So I think it's not. So that doesn't sound very magic wandy. I would sit down and I would liberate his braveness to say no to some things, and to really prioritise, and to use these 5 years to change things. And my magic wand would be used to transform, because it's quite difficult, transform the way that finances are done internally in Scottish Government, and actually probably in local government. Yeah, local government also. Because what we've done is we've constructed, and it's not, it happens in every bureaucracy, I suspect, in the world. We've constructed finance systems that are they're very, of course, we've got to be risk averse. It's public money, so they're constructed in a certain way. They're very clunky. They grow arms and legs, and then this and that, and then the next thing, and then it's very, very difficult to actually invest in the things you want to invest in. And so if we should be, I want a 10-year plan for the third sector in child and young people's things, and I want the finances to be able to deal with that. I want us to be able to procure without. If it's procurement still has to exist. You can't just be giving things to your friends, because that's why procurement exists, right? But how do we make it more ethical? All the stuff that CCPS is working on. How do we actually embed that? So my magic wand would just be instantly transforming our finance systems to make them much more agile, much more flexible, and much more fit for purpose, and that would allow fair funding for the sector, would allow our officials, many of whom are great, some of whom are, there's great ones, there's not so good ones, like in every
like
sector,
everywhere,
could be liberated to do what it is they're passionate about doing. Because like a lot of them, a lot of the people we have contact with really want to make a change, additional support for learning. But they have to spend a lot of time doing bureaucratic stuff that actually isn't adding any value to their work or to our work. So so I'd start with the finance system. Do you think, could you give me a magic one now?
If only, if only. Wouldn't that be good? That's what I should bring in it as a little prop when we go ding. It would be wonderful, wouldn't it? Definitely. And that, because I think you're right, there are so many good people. But they are handcuffed, restricted, whatever you want to say, by some of the structures and the way things operate, aren't they? That stops them doing the things that they're passionate about. That's the reason they got into what they do in the first place in so many ways. So I definitely think a reduction in bureaucracy would be a good thing. Absolutely. So good. Thank you so much for joining me today. Is there anything you wanted to talk about that we have not covered today?
There's just one thing that I wanted to ask you, because I'm interested in the rights work that you're doing with your practitioners. Is that embedded now? Are you doing it? Is it working well?
We're working on it at the moment. Some of our services are further on than others, and some of them are racing ahead with things of it. And it's getting that balance right, isn't it? About doing it quickly and doing it well, so that everybody really understands, and the children and families are part of it, and everybody is involved in that. So where the decisions are taken, right down to really, really simple things that make a huge difference to the children. So thinking about garden design and those kind of things, that it's their garden, they should be able to be part of that. So all of those kind of things that we're moving towards opening that kind of thing out more and giving people examples of what those individual children's rights mean for the children in the services, and how we can ensure that that we are following that and making sure children have what they need and what they want within our services. So it's been really interesting, and children are much more capable than we think sometimes, of giving their opinions and their thoughts on things and being part of that discussion, and they're interested in their rights as well, and what what it means to them and their lives. So those conversations are really interesting to have, and the team are doing really well with it, actually. Really well with it. They're embracing it, I would say. So it's good to see, and they've spent a lot of time thinking about that, what it means, the definition of it. There's what it says here in the article. What does that practically mean for us on the ground in this service, kind of thing. So that's been good to see. But it's the whole thing just feels exciting and a positive move, doesn't it, for the country? It's such an achievement to get that enshrined in law. And my husband works with children here in Scotland, so in his office in the house he's got the poster for the children's rights and things, and when my wee grandson's there, he's saying, and what's this one and what does this mean? So these conversations, and that's been since he's 3.5 now, but a good easily a year or more we've had those conversations. So they're interested from such a young age in that sort of thing, aren't they? And it's a nice, and we'll have a good future if we bring these children up the right way with that ability and interest in the way the world operates. So they're going to be making the decisions about our lives, aren't they, in the future? So we need to get it right. Absolutely. So cool. So
great.
Thank you so much. It has been a joy to chat today as part of our Connecting the Dots podcast. So I really enjoyed talking to you and looking forward to this one going live. So
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.